Think you know the whole story? Turns out you were probably taught the half-truth. Welcome to Half-Truths. Think back to the first pet you ever truly called your own. For a lot of us, it wasn't a puppy or a kitten. It was a flash of orange in a small plastic bag, a prize won at a county fair or a school carnival. It was a goldfish. You brought it home, put it in a little glass bowl on your dresser, sprinkled in some flakes, and gave it a name, Comet, Goldie, Finny. And as you watched it swim its endless, looping path, you were told a fundamental truth about your new companion, a fact as clear and simple as the water in its bowl. Your goldfish has a 3-second memory. It was a perfect, bite-sized piece of trivia. It explained everything. The endless circling, it was always discovering its home for the first time. The vacant stare, pure, blissful ignorance. Every 3 seconds, its tiny brain would reboot. The castle was new. The plastic plant was new. You, peering through the glass, were a brand new, fascinating giant. It was almost poetic, a creature living in a state of perpetual wonder, unburdened by the past. It was also, let's be honest, a little bit funny, the ultimate airhead of the animal kingdom. This fact became a cultural touchstone. It's a punchline in movies, a metaphor for forgetfulness in conversation. We say someone has the memory of a goldfish to describe a fleeting attention span. It's one of those pieces of common knowledge we absorb without question, filed away alongside the idea that lemmings jump off cliffs or that we only use 10% of our brains. It feels right. It makes sense for such a simple creature. But what if that story, that neat and tidy explanation for the life inside the fishbowl, isn't the whole story? What if the simple narrative we've built around this common pet is just that, a story, a half-truth we've told ourselves for so long we've forgotten it was ever just an assumption? What if inside that tiny, shimmering head there's a memory that lasts not for seconds, but for weeks, months, or even longer? The story we all know is comforting in its simplicity. The goldfish is the Sisyphus of the aquatic world, but without the torment. It's not pushing a boulder, just its own body through the water. And with every lap, the hill is brand new. There's a certain freedom in that, we imagine. No grudges, no boredom, no existential dread about the confines of its glass universe. This idea is incredibly useful. It absolves us of a tremendous amount of guilt. If your goldfish has no memory of the past, then it has no concept of a future. And its present is a constantly refreshing stream of novelty. That tiny, unadorned bowl, it's not a prison. It's an infinite landscape of discovery. The lack of stimulation, the absence of companionship, the repetitive environment, none of it matters. The fish can't get bored because, in 3 seconds, the very concept of boredom will have vanished from its mind. The 3-second memory myth is the perfect justification for the minimalist approach to fish keeping that so many of us grew up with. It transformed what would otherwise seem a rather bleak existence into something almost zen-like. It allowed us to see the goldfish not as a complex living organism with needs, but as a biological decoration, a living lava lamp. It's an idea so potent because it serves our own emotional needs perfectly. We get the pleasure of owning a pet without the heavy weight of responsibility for its psychological well-being. And the myth spread, not through scientific journals, but through cultural osmosis. It was passed from parent to child, from one pet store employee to a new fish owner. It requires no evidence because it confirms our biases about the hierarchy of intelligence. Of course, a fish is forgetful. It's just a fish. It fits neatly into our understanding of the world, where humans sit at the top, and the cognitive abilities of other creatures diminish as they move further away from us on the evolutionary tree. The goldfish, in its silent, watery world, became the poster child for intellectual simplicity. It was an easy joke, a simple metaphor, and a convenient truth. But stories, especially the convenient ones, have a funny way of falling apart when you start to pull at the threads. And the thread of the goldfish myth begins to unravel with a very simple, logical question. How does it eat? Think about it. If a goldfish truly forgot everything every 3 seconds, how would it ever learn the connection between the colorful flakes appearing on the surface of the water and the act of swimming up to eat them? That act alone requires a chain of memory. First, the fish must recognize the flakes as food, an association it isn't born with. Second, it must remember that food appears at the top of the tank. And third, it must recall the series of muscle movements required to propel itself upward. If its memory reset every 3 seconds, it would starve to death, perpetually surprised by the strange, colorful confetti appearing above it, never making the connection. The very survival of the pet store goldfish is the first piece of evidence against its own myth. So where did this idea even come from? If you try to trace the 3-second memory claim back to a source, a specific scientific paper, or a definitive study, you'll find yourself in a library of ghosts. It doesn't exist. There is no landmark experiment, no famous animal psychologist who proclaimed it to the world. It appears to be a piece of pure folklore, an old wives' tale that grew legs, or rather, fins. Some speculate it may have originated in advertising, as a clever way to sell more fish or fish-related products by downplaying the commitment. Others think it was just a throwaway line in a piece of fiction that caught on. The truth is, nobody is quite sure of its genesis. It simply is. It's a zombie idea, a myth that persists despite having no brain, no verifiable origin to sustain it. But long before the myth became a popular punchline, scientists were already quietly discovering that the inner lives of fish were far more complex than we ever imagined. The real investigation began not with goldfish in a bowl, but with their wilder cousins, carp, and the basic principles of animal learning. As early as the 1950s and 60s, researchers were exploring associative learning in fish. This is the same basic principle that the Russian physiologist Ivan Pavlov famously demonstrated with his dogs. The idea that an animal can be trained to associate a neutral stimulus, like a bell, with a significant one, like food. It turns out, fish are excellent students of Pavlov. In numerous experiments, scientists would pair a specific sound, a flash of light, or a colored object with the delivery of food. At first, the fish would react only to the food, but soon enough, they began to react to the stimulus alone, swimming eagerly to the feeding spot the moment they heard the sound or saw the light, long before any food arrived. This behavior is impossible without memory. The fish has to remember that the sound means food is coming, and they don't just remember it for a few seconds. Researchers found that the fish retained this training for weeks, and in many cases, for months. They were building lasting connections between events, a cognitive ability far beyond the scope of a 3-second mental reset button. These early studies were the first scientific nails in the coffin of the goldfish myth, even if the world at large wasn't paying attention. The convenient story was still far more popular than the complicated truth being uncovered in university laboratories. The real story, the one built on decades of careful observation and experimentation, paints a picture of the goldfish that is almost unrecognizable from the myth. Forget the bumbling, forgetful creature of pop culture. The real goldfish is a creature of surprising cognitive depth, with a memory that is not only functional, but impressively robust. Let's travel to the University of Plymouth in England, back in 1994. Researchers there designed a simple but elegant experiment. They trained goldfish to associate a specific sound with feeding time. Every time they played a particular tone into the water, they would drop food into the tank. Very quickly, the goldfish learned the connection. The moment the sound played, they would swarm to the feeding area in anticipation. This alone proved memory beyond a few seconds, but the researchers took it a step further. After the training was complete, they stopped playing the sound and continued feeding the fish normally for a full month. A month later, they played the sound again. Instantly, without hesitation, the fish rushed to the feeding spot. They remembered. A month of silence hadn't erased the connection. Their memory wasn't just a fleeting impression, it was a durable piece of information, stored and ready to be recalled. And this wasn't a one-off finding. Study after study has replicated and expanded upon this, demonstrating that a goldfish's memory isn't measured in seconds, but in months, with some studies suggesting they can retain information for at least 5 months, and likely much longer. In another fascinating series of experiments, scientists at Israel's Ben-Gurion University trained young fish to associate a specific sound with food. After the training was complete, they released the fish into the wild. Several months later, when the fish were fully grown, the researchers returned to the same spot and played the sound. Just as before, the fish came flocking back, drawn by a memory forged in their youth. They had not only survived in the wild, but had carried that specific artificial memory with them the entire time. But their abilities go far beyond simple sound association. Goldfish have demonstrated a remarkable capacity for recognizing patterns and people. Many owners will tell you anecdotally that their fish seems to recognize them, getting excited when they approach the tank but hiding when a stranger does. This isn't just wishful thinking. Research has confirmed it. Fish can be trained to distinguish between different human faces. They can also learn to navigate complex mazes, remembering the correct path to a reward and improving their time with practice, a classic test of spatial memory. Perhaps one of the most compelling figures in the field of fish intelligence is Dr. Cullum Brown from Macquarie University in Australia. He has spent his career challenging our underestimation of aquatic minds. His work has shown that fish can learn from each other, a form of social learning. They can recognize predators they've only seen once and remember that threat for months afterward. Some species of fish have even been observed using tools, like using a rock to crack open a clam. This isn't the behavior of an animal with a brain that constantly wipes itself clean. This is the behavior of a thinking, learning, and remembering creature. So, if a goldfish can remember a sound for 5 months, recognize its owner, and navigate a maze, what does its world really look like? It's certainly not a world of constant blissful rediscovery. It's a world of patterns, expectations, and memories. The fish in the bowl remembers where the food appears. It remembers the shape of the room seen through the glass. It recognizes the person who cares for it. And, crucially, it likely remembers the monotony. The truth is that the small, empty glass bowl, long considered a perfectly acceptable home based on a false premise, is likely a profoundly understimulating and stressful environment for a creature with the cognitive abilities of a goldfish. The real story isn't a funny anecdote about a forgetful fish. It's a cautionary tale about our own assumptions. The myth of the 3-second memory wasn't just wrong. It was a profound disservice to the animal itself. It allowed us to justify neglect, to excuse poor husbandry, and to fundamentally misunderstand the nature of a life we had taken into our care. The real goldfish is not a simpleton, but a complex animal trapped by a simple story. So, we've journeyed from the familiar image of the perpetually surprised fish in a carnival bag to the scientific reality of a creature with a memory spanning months, capable of learning, recognition, and complex association. We've replaced a simple, convenient myth with a more complicated and, frankly, more interesting truth. But why does busting this particular half-truth matter? It's just a goldfish, after all. It matters because the story of the goldfish's memory isn't really about the goldfish. It's about us. It's a perfect case study in how we construct narratives about the natural world that are often based more on our own convenience and biases than on scientific reality. The 3-second memory myth was popular because it was useful. It made us feel better. It absolved us of the responsibility to provide a rich, stimulating environment for our pets. It reinforced our comfortable position at the top of the intellectual ladder. Unlearning this myth forces us to ask bigger questions. If we could be so wrong about an animal this common, an animal that millions of us have kept in our own homes, what other assumptions are we making? What other creatures have we underestimated? The line between intelligent animals worthy of our consideration and simple ones that exist merely for our amusement has always been drawn by us. And time again, science proves that we have drawn that line in the wrong place. Correcting this half-truth is a small act of intellectual humility. It's an admission that common knowledge is not always correct knowledge, and that the inner lives of other beings are often far richer and more complex than we can easily imagine. It teaches us that the stories we tell ourselves about the world have real consequences, in this case, for the well-being of millions of living creatures confined to glass bowls. The myth allowed us to see a biological machine. The truth asks us to see a mind. Our world is full of these convenient fictions, these half-truths that simplify reality in a way that serves our own perspective. But the truth, while often more complex, is almost always more fascinating. The goldfish is not a symbol of forgetfulness, living in a constant, meaningless present. It is a vessel of memory, carrying its past with it through the water, a silent testament to the fact that we often see not what is there, but what we expect to see. Now you know the real story. What other half-truths are still out there? If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a comment, and join us next time. Until then, stay curious.